Hello world, Augustine Cortez coming to you live from Web3, and today I would say we had a breakthrough day. Um, Sat down today to discuss and dissect the variables in the goal to create a protocol for what it means to be educated. Because if you ask people what it means to educated, you're gonna get different answers. But what's interesting is that those answers will have a common ground. So if you ask people, they'll probably say to be educated means you have a lot of knowledge. It means you have wisdom. It means you have skills. It means that you have a certain type of identity, right? And tying this to an algorithm, to a protocol, since there isn't an objective answer, creating a consensus mechanism to get people to validate this algorithm becomes challenging. Your inputs have to be very, very correlated, have a lot of relevancy with one another to generate the desired outcome. So that led to the question, okay, what is this? What are these variables? What components does it entail? Will it cover this? And it led down a very interesting rabbit hole in education and pedagogy and the current system, the internet, blockchain, and it's very exciting. And I believe we have a strong base on this algorithm and this protocol. Now it's time to dive further and reach the next steps. But what I also want to bring up is this consensus mechanism on what it means to be educated. A lot of people will give similar answers, right? But the most established protocol to date is the university system, right? And speaking in post-secondary language or for post-secondary learners in education. University system is where people get credentials. It's a big part of education as well. Whether you have a bachelor's, a master's, a PhD, this university protocol goes from validation of assessment and makes you do some proof of skill and you get this certificate, right? But if you look under the hood of this protocol, the variables to get to the outcome are very outdated. A lot of things that uh, made the current education system are outdated. A lot of this had to do with your peripheral. It's like where you live mattered, who you were born into, your pedigree, your financial status, Ivy League institution where it's about connections, and other variables that are obsolete and actually are regressive because there's a better solution. And that solution is the internet. The internet allows for autodidacticism to flourish. And that's just a fancy word to say self-educate, because the internet creates an incentive ecosystem for educators and learners and can create a new protocol for people to learn, for people to become educated. However, there hasn't been a protocol or a process to get the validation around the world for what it means to be educated. And this leads to creating an algorithm to really create a structure for people to have a consensus of agreement, belief, and have respect for the ideology of these rules. And I believe there's 4 base units that will always be there for education, no matter what you're learning, where you're learning, who you're learning from, no matter whatever question will arise, these bases will always be there when it comes for education. And the fact that we have base variables, we can create functions and processes to start documenting data and getting this onto the blockchain. And if we do this right, this will revolutionize humanity. I think it will be one of the things that will progress social mobility beyond our imagination. Because if you think about it, education is one of the most progressive things in the world. It's the reason you're watching this. It's the reason we have internet. It's the reason we have infrastructure. It's the reason we advance in medicine and so on. So if the world and the economics of education change for the better, humanity will become more educated and more progression will happen. also known as social mobility, right? And to dive into the base of the variables, the four of them are proof of learning, proof of knowledge, proof of skill, and proof of educational identity. I'll probably make a video for each variable because they deserve so, but to give the high overviews of each is proof of learning is simply data tracking that you are exerting energy and time to a certain domain. It's fairly simple, right? If you want to learn something, well, you got to put the time and energy and effort to do so. Okay, well, is there a way to track that? There is. And we'll discuss the process on how to track, proof of learning. So that's step one. Step two is proof of knowledge. Knowledge is essentially testing your theory, your declarative capability to tie information and systems together to get a theoretical outcome. So the premise of knowledge is that it's theory-based. So you can be tested via assessment, where an external party can ask you questions, and if you answer those questions correctly, you have knowledge. But that's not it to education, because there's a bridge between theory and experience, and this is where proof of skill comes in. Proof of skill is where inputs lead to outputs, and it's based off experience, real world matter, where if you have knowledge in a certain domain, well, to validate you have that knowledge and education is make calculated decisions, also known as inputs, to get the desired outcome. And if you can do that, okay, you have experience, you can do it. It's not like you can read to learn on how to ride a bike. You have to do it. You have to get on the bike pedals. You have to get a sense of your balance. You have to use momentum, and you have to experience it, right? It activates a certain part of the brain where theory won't activate it. So there are plenty of things that have to be experience-based. So then moving to the last one of proof of identity, educational identity. This one is where it's more interesting because it's subjective, right? It's an area that is subjective, but there are objective processes to feed this subjective outcome. And it goes back to data tracking. But the whole premise of this is to create educational identity for your values and beliefs, because education creates value and beliefs. And the more educated you become, the more diverse or the more in-depth of your values and beliefs you're going to start to foster. So there's a protocol and an algorithm to start creating these values on chain and create this identity. So with these base variables, we can now address the question of what it means to be educated. Well, you have to have proof of learning, you have to have proof of knowledge, proof of skill, and have an educational identity. And if you address each variable, then people can say, okay, you know what? That's education. This person is educated. They hit the checklist. And the beauty of this on blockchain is that all the data will be accessible, open to the world. You can see how many hours I spent in proof of learning, what areas I have knowledge in, what skills I have by my experience, and you get to learn more about my education identity. Okay, all this accessible. Let me use this as a passport to navigate the internet. Who knows what possibilities will arise from this? From networking to employment to political alignment to collaboration, endless opportunities. All right, so I'll pause it here. This day was honestly, I would call it breakthrough, because this is something I've been thinking about for several months. I mean, honestly, several years, because it's the reason we started learning in the first place. Like, it's a pain point that we have being an autodidact. There isn't a consensus mechanism on proof of education. It doesn't exist on the web, and that's a shame. And this is why we're coming in, we're building this from the ground up, and it's ambitious, but This is what we die for. This is the love of the journey, the love of the venture, and the visionary coming into fruition. Okay, so we'll conclude it here. Tomorrow's a new day to build and learn, and can't wait to start working to bring this protocol to life. Who knows where the social mobility will lead to. All right, so thank you for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow.